Hello and welcome to Dissolving Depersonalization and Derealization with 4 simple premises. And if you don't know me, hi, I'm Lily Seiss. I am a former school psychologist turned mental health practitioner or anxiety coach. And I experienced depersonalization and derealization on and off for 7 years. I didn't know that's what I was experiencing until after. And I didn't even need to know. I approached it the same way you could approach panic or anxiety, but I couldn't express what it was like, my feeling of panic attacks, my feeling of anxiety. And I think it added to feeling like this is more than anxiety, this is more than panic, which is so common for people experiencing heightened anxiety, like an anxiety disorder. Also for me, mine did involve OCD. I didn't have a diagnosis, but I know that OCD and depersonalization and derealization can kind of get linked in that a lot of people can obsess over their mental health, obsess over the symptoms of DPDR, have intrusive thought. Mine felt so big. It felt like this can't be just anxiety and panic and I'm doing everything right. Why am I feeling so horrible? And maybe I'm really going to lose my mind. And when I actually was on the other side and was healed and was at peace again, and was in a place of well-being and confident about my mental health, and I started sharing on social media, so many people were like, oh my gosh, you put this into words, a lot about DPDR. I thought about my symptoms. I was so on guard because it made a lot of sense. It was like, if I could lose my mind, I got to be on guard. I was so afraid of panic attacks. So I would wake up in the morning, and kind of scan, because I thought if I caught something early, I could stop it. I think it's a kind of a common misconception. So I would scan my body. I would monitor. Everything I was doing was so innocent and it was so justified. It made sense. Of course, I should focus on my sleep, but then I'd be scared if I didn't fall asleep by 10 p.m. because I had read that the most important hours were 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And obviously you should get 7 or 8 hours. But if I didn't, I would start to get anxious and I think, oh no, now am I going to have a panic attack? I had so much thinking around panic attacks, which were DPDR for me. So I wanted to share a little bit about the DPDR cycle that I see as pretty common because it feels so unpleasant and so unsafe. Anxiety and depersonalization and derealization, we focus on it because it's well, this would make sense because I got to keep my eye on it. Often pretty common wondering what's causing it. And so what it is you're seeing is adding more thinking. Some common things, am I going insane? Can I damage myself? Maybe I'm not real. How long is this going to last? Am I dreaming? Am I still high? Whatever questions are symptoms. So when people start to say, well, but this question, I do need to think about it. Justification really traps us in our experience, but just no, questioning is part of it. It's part of that cycle. We try and figure out how to feel better. And then we get this increased anxiety and increased symptoms because we're taxing our brain. We're exhausting our brain. We're thinking about ourselves. We're we're scaring ourselves. And our brain's just sending us more messages enough is enough is enough. But there is definitely a way out of the cycle. And that's why understanding it is going to help you. Understanding what I'm talking about and also understanding number 3, understanding predictable symptoms helps us leave them alone, and leaving them alone is the best because we have an inbuilt healing system. I think it's number 1, not number 2. So when you understand that, just as you understand predictable symptoms of a cold, you leave them alone. It's great to leave it alone because you've got an inbuilt healing system. I'm going to go into that more too. But one of the most common thoughts is, what if it's not anxiety? It is, and that's when I would struggle, or even when I was still on my healing journey, because it wasn't I went from anxiety to none. So I wanted to share some pretty common symptoms of depersonalization and derealization. A lot of people can feel really off in their head, just this weird head feeling. You can feel cut off from reality. You can feel like you're not real. Time feels distorted. You can really fear going insane. That's a pretty common one. Very common to think, but this is more than DPDR. Have a lot of questions, as I said. And the reason I put the image of the woman blowing her nose is when we understand the predictable symptoms of a cold or a flu, we can leave them alone. We don't have to add on that second layer of stress. We're yeah, when I get a cold, sometimes my throat hurts. And then you know what? At one point, both of my nostrils clog up. And sometimes my ears. But we also understand that sometimes they reach this peak of both nostrils clogged up, throat hurts so much. And we know, well, I always get better. We don't have to add on that second layer of like obsessing and worrying. I know some of you maybe also have health anxiety, so you might have some worry, but sometimes you probably can think of a time when maybe you have your period and you understand those predictable symptoms, including predictable thoughts. Like when I used to have some kind of PMS thoughts and feelings, it would be kind of feeling unhappy with my physical body and how I look. But I would never start a diet that day or anything because I'd know like sometimes when I get my period, I don't feel so fat and disgusting. I also usually used to be much more sensitive around my cycle and have like more relationship insecure thoughts. Oh, you know what? I know a lot of it. Sometimes I still have insecure thoughts. Like if my boyfriend, it sounds so silly and so embarrassing. Sometimes if he talks about women or connecting with a woman colleague or something, sometimes my brain's like, he loves her and he's going to cheat on you. I know that's kind of predictable and distorted. And sometimes when he goes out of town, I have a little bit more insecure thinking. But I know that what's behind it, it's distorted thinking. So I don't want to get my guidance. So understanding the predictably distorted and predictable symptoms helps us like, okay, I'm gonna leave that. I have some more predictable symptoms though of DPDR. A lot of fears. A lot of people can feel very uncomfortable looking in the mirror. That was definitely true for me. Looking at pictures, we cannot recognize ourselves sometimes. Looking at pictures of family, sometimes it's like you don't recognize them. You don't have a good feeling. A lot of people, that was I know it's a very common thing. People sometimes they don't feel like they recognize their family. They don't feel like they recognize themselves. They just don't feel as close. Like they don't feel this loving feeling and it feels horrible. Feel very weird in supermarkets. Sometimes the overhead lights and just like the noises and can feel very overwhelming. I wanted to share in my Peace from Within community, I have a video with a woman who she'd experienced a little bit of DPDR from some trauma and stuff from her childhood. She never was scared of it. She never knew that people were afraid of it until she started seeing my videos. And so we have a video, kind of like a very lighthearted discussion about it. But she said when she didn't recognize herself in the mirror, she'd be like, oh, cool. Is this what I look like to other people? And she'd be so into it. At the minute, it would just dissolve because she had no fear. And when her hands would look weird, she'd be like, whoa, cool. And then it would just dissolve. A lot of times there's visual symptoms, which makes sense when we're thinking that this is a defense mechanism that happens in true danger, where it would make sense that like our vision would be spidey powered if we were in actual danger. But with DPDR, often we're like, I'm just sitting in my house. Very common is existential thoughts, these big unanswerable thoughts about just life and big things. And oftentimes people think, well, if I need to answer this question, I've had so many clients that think, I need to answer it because if I don't answer it, I could still be suffering at 80. But one, you are not going to answer it in that state of mind because when we're anxious, we're like, our IQ drops. You are not smart. You're not in the place to answer it. You're not in a good state of mind. And also, you are never going to see more clearly by thinking more. Some of those existential thoughts, they're just big picture thoughts, or like they're kind of those big thoughts. And when we add more thinking, our brain is like, I am exhausted. And so we just keep feeling DPDR. I never, ever enjoy entertaining existential thoughts, but I'm not like I'm not resisting them, but I'm like, I don't really enjoy contemplating them. And I know my peace of mind does not lie in the end of an existential thought. Like I'm not going to get clarity, but just knowing, like those might be tempting. Like peace and good feeling does not lie engaging. If you know that, sometimes it might be tempting. But if you know, like if you kind of picture a bus and it says existential thoughts, if you know that when you get on that bus is going to hell, you're like, I'm not going to get on your bus. Feeling emotionally numb, and a lot of people get scared because you can feel a bit removed, which would make sense if you were in danger. You don't need to feel all your emotions then, you're just in survival. But you know what, it's not funny, but sort of funny. People are like, I don't feel anything, but they actually feel anxious. Same kind of with an unfocused blank mind. I mean, no offense of making it light, because I know it can seem so serious. I just know that it is lighter than you think. It really is. A lot of people can feel unfocused. They can feel like their mind is blank, that they're having trouble putting together a sentence or a thought. But every time I'm like, well, you are. I actually don't say this because I wouldn't say that usually at that moment. But what I'm saying to you is like, you are putting a thought together and you are putting together a sentence that it feels a lot worse than it is. I think that's a huge thing with anxiety is it feels, but just because we feel something strongly doesn't mean it's true. I had a client who was also healing from DPDR, but there was a time when his stomach hurt and both of his brothers had an appendicitis. And so we thought, oh, this is probably an appendicitis. But he kind of put it off and stayed at work. And then the next day his stomach still hurt. And he was like, oh my God, my appendix is about to burst. That's what felt so true. He's like, both of my brothers, oh my gosh, living in this feeling like his appendix was going to burst any minute. And he went to the ER and they did an x-ray and he was just constipated. And then it was like, oh, so just because we have a thought, oh my God, I am losing my mind. Maybe it is early onset dementia. Maybe it's this. Just because it feels true doesn't mean it is. A lot of people also worry about their memory, but DPDR does not impact your memory, but it can feel like it because we are not on top of our game. Our brain is like, I'm just tired. You have been working hard. I have been working hard. So I wanted to say those of you can know they're pretty predictable. And some of the thoughts that would come, some of the predictable thoughts, you might take a time and maybe you could think of some of your predictable thoughts. My predictable symptoms, often when I would be driving, it felt like my eyeballs felt very weird too. It felt like they were loose. And a lot of my predictable thoughts were, what if this is more than anxiety and panic? What if I could lose my mind? And a number 4 premise. Well, let me finish up actually here of why it's helpful to understand predictable symptoms. I'm going to go back to here. Okay. Understanding the predictable symptoms helps you leave it alone. And leaving it alone is so helpful because your body and your mind is designed to go back to balance. Like if you have ever been startled, someone came up behind you in the kitchen or something got knocked over in your house, that's the start of a panic attack. That's the start of a stress response. You might get there. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to work hard to return to normal. You are designed that way. So usually we just let it go. We go back to reading or making a video or making dinner, and we are designed to go back to balance. Just as if you have a flu, you know the predictable symptoms, and so you just make yourself comfortable and you don't have to work hard to go back to feeling normal. That is your default. The same is true for DPDR. Okay. And number 4, we're always living in the feeling of our thinking, and that's not a problem because thoughts flow all on its own. Our experience, our thoughts and feelings are meant to flow. So I already shared a little bit about that in that last one of how we're living in the feeling of our thinking. I bet you can already think of times in the past when you've experienced DPDR, you've had a whole load of scary thinking. And then afterwards, you're like, that was not true. Thoughts flow all on their own. They really do. Our experience flows. I'm sure when the last time you've had a cold or a flu, your experience has ebbed and flowed. We stop experience from flowing when we resist it, and so I can do this. I can squeeze my hands, but I do it and it starts to hurt. And the hurting is a signal for me to let go. And when we let go, we allow ourselves to feel. We're not like, I don't want any DPDR. I don't want to lose my mind. Like it actually is the trying not to. It's the resisting it that keeps it around because then we're checking, then we're trying to stay on top of it where it's like, oh, you understand it. I'm not losing my mind. My brain just needs a break. You understand it. You allow it. I swear you start to see that you're going to be one thought away from a whole new experience in a great way. That's why sometimes you go into a room, you're like, why did I come in here? Because a thought flew out of your head. That's possible for thoughts about your sanity, thoughts about your memory. When we don't hold them so tightly, they just flow. That's what experience is meant to do. So you can feel a little DPDR out to dinner, on a plane. And when you understand it, you don't fear it. Rather than resisting it, you have an arms open wide approach. You don't try to have to force yourself to feel normal, test yourself. You just can rest easy knowing you are designed so beautifully. You are designed for your thoughts to flow. We're always living in the feeling of our thinking. And so new thoughts are going to come because that's just how you're designed. When you allow yourself to feel the symptoms without trying to do anything about that. But don't make it a technique, because if you make it a technique, it loses its power. Because when we make something a technique, we're up in our head, we're thinking. And what we need is less thinking here because our brain's tired. You truly are designed so beautifully. You are designed to come back into balance. You are designed for fresh new thinking. I bet you can think of that all the time. Sometimes when we have like a really happy thought about winning the lottery or what we're going to do on the weekend or what we're going to make for dinner, we have those thoughts and then they go. No, that's just how it is. Thoughts are always coming and going. Experience is always coming and going. The symptoms of DPDR are from anxiety and stress and just overusing our brain and overthinking. And you can't cure the symptoms of overthinking by overthinking more. So this is like, oh, but you don't need to stress about it. But it's like, wow, just get curious. I just want you to contemplate or be open to consider, wow, have I been overthinking? Have I been overusing my brain? Have I been innocently doing too much? Wow, isn't that interesting? Am I designed beautifully? Yeah, you are. Is there less for me to do? Is doing less could doing less naturally help my nervous system settle, naturally help me feel better? And you just start to get on to yourself. And these are just some things I want you to consider. And I hope this was helpful and just a helpful start. And if you at all want more support, I invite you to join my Peace from Within community. I have live group coaching sessions, and right now they're still small. I did one today. There was like about 8 people there. You get to talk with me live once or twice a week. Right now I'm doing stuff twice a week. If you want continued support, it's an amazing community. I have so much stuff on DPDR and anxiety and panic, and it is my passion, so I create more. But I share all in this vein of a very simple, very achievable, very hopeful, very light way. So I'm never going to give you techniques that you need or diet changes or meditation stuff. It's very light. It's very easy. It's very hopeful. And there is always hope because there is always help. I hope this was helpful. And I'm sending you a big hug and lots of love.